Shazam Fury of the Gods made me furious and is DC's hottest mess yet. Here's why. Shazam Part 2 was an unprecedented mess, going on to become one of, if not the worst grossing DCEU movie in history. It barely managed to break even and even recover its budget, all that good stuff. Now understandably, there were marketing issues with the film and the release was at a terrible time. I mean, John Wick and Dungeons and Dragons on the lineup for March. So the movie had an unfair disadvantage from the start. Not sure how that's our fault, more the problem of the DCE not knowing what to even do with their universe. But it is what it is. I'm not going to sit here and pretend like it was only the film's messiness that caused it to flop. We're not here to talk about that, by the way. I take it you've also heard how bad the movie was all over the internet, people ranting about it, etc. Maybe you've even watched it yourself and experienced it firsthand. Don't worry, I'm not here to rant. What fun would that be? No, I'm here to talk about what was fundamentally wrong and right with this story. I'm not of the opinion that something can be objectively bad. It is a story after all. Everything is subjective. There's the good and the bad. Okay, without further delay, let's dive right in, shall we? The first thing I want to point out is the tone of the story. Let's establish that. It mainly just followed the tone of its first installment. It was hearty, cheery, PG, something that was meant for the whole family, you could just tell. And why this was the selling point of the first part, it might have single-handedly been the undoing of this movie. There is so much to unpack here, and this really ties into every other poor choice in this movie. It's one thing for a movie to be PG, it's another to be a comedic mishap or parody. One grants a good time to the entire family, the other does nothing but zero the stakes, which is exactly what happened with Shazam 2. But I'll talk more on that later. You can get a PG movie right, there are countless examples of that. Take the Karate Kid, Spirited Away, or even the Barbie movie that just came out this year. These movies were all extremely successful and they achieved what they wanted to, but they were still PG. I think you already know where I'm going with this. PG doesn't equal bad if you follow the steps that fundamentally make a story. Because a PG story is still a story regardless. I think with PG movies, stories, family movies, there's always a potential for an even greater feat because you're basically reaching a wider audience. A perfect example would be the Harry Potter franchise. There's a reason why J.K. Rowling is like the best-selling author of our century. It's because she struck the perfect balance between what kids and adults as well would love. Granted, it is not easy, certainly not something that can be replicated just like that. However, that does not mean you can't still tap into the advantage because it is massive. I don't know what the producers were thinking with Shazam, but they certainly missed the mark on this. Like, it just felt like a joke all through. I literally didn't feel any stakes. And that's another interesting thing because you see, as a PG story, a family story, you wouldn't expect the same kind of stakes in, say, John Wick. Definitely not Game of Thrones, or even in Man of Steel, which is also a superhero movie, in something like Shazam. That said, a story can't do without stakes. We need it there, no matter the tone of the story, no matter the genre. Even romance stories have stakes. Take for example, Red, White, and Royal Blue. Like, it just has to be there for the reader to be invested. That's the whole reason anyone continues watching a movie or reading a book. They're invested in the character or world, they can clearly see what the character cannot get, and they want to know whether or not they will eventually get it. I mean, that's like the whole point, that's basically it. That's the payoff the watcher or the reader wants to know what is going to be the fate of this world or character they're so much invested in. Of course, that would quite literally mean they'd have to be, invested in the first place, which is another area this movie failed. The characters. Now, I won't lie that every character in this movie was whack. That's simply not true. We had some great ones, I think. I particularly liked Mary's character, just cause she was the only one who actually gave us a deep, meaningful insight into her struggles, and that says a lot. I know some people might argue like, oh well, the characters are mainly children. What serious struggle could they possibly have? That is absolute BS and a detrimental way of saying things. Aang was a 15-year-old boy when he had the fate of the world on his shoulders. And we got the sense that he had the fate of the world on his shoulders. We got to see his grief, his pain, his growth, all the things that made his path much more difficult and ultimately made us, the audience, want to root for him. The same with Harry. He was treated horribly while growing up, and we got to sympathize with his character because really no one wants that for their kid. No one even wants that kind of treatment for their enemy's kid. However, with Billy Batson, we get a man baby crying about how he doesn't want his older sister to go to college. Excuse me? Add to the fact that he can't even pronounce Solomon. We're ultimately left wondering, what the heck are we even doing with this guy on the front page? Heck, even Freddy was more compelling. And that says a lot. There's also this scene at the beginning of the movie when he visits a therapist who's actually a pediatrician, by the way, and tells him his struggles with him being a Superman ripoff and all that. Basically, his very understandable imposter syndrome. And I'm just watching that scene thinking, well, he has a point there. Why on earth is the main character's motivation in a superhero movie just wanting to hang out with his family a bit more, when we've seen riveting stories and struggles from other franchises? With Spider-Man, which continues to be a classic, he has to navigate saving the entire world selflessly while grieving a loved one. In Aquaman, we see a man thrust into a world he doesn't understand and faced with the staggering task of being their king. Iron Man has a long road ahead of him in atoning for his sins and doing what is right, and he accomplishes that at the end. We even managed to get some semblance of Billy's intent during the climax, but once again, the tone throughout the movie makes the impact almost non-existent. Sure, we were expecting him not to die, but then again, we shouldn't see it from an ocean away. Superhero movies in particular struggle with making characters with resonating struggles and motivations, mostly because of the structure. So the few times the characters are allowed to shine, they should draw us in. And you don't achieve that by petty, witty dialogue. You achieve that by taking us on a journey into their minds, how they think, how they operate, what's supposed to drive them to the brink of insanity. That's what's going to make us interested. Briefly, if you're enjoying this video, do well to like and subscribe. It really helps with the algorithm. Now, one thing that has been a plague to the superhero movie industry in recent years has been fan service. It's a plague that's dug its roots deep and is even ripping at the MCU. When a writer or a filmmaker doesn't know where to draw the line between appeasing the audience and staying true to the story, it almost inevitably results in a horror show. The romance between Anthea and Freddy? Sure, it was cute, but did it really serve the plot well? What if, instead of having Freddy forgive her so easily for lying to him and having him subjected to her sister's torture? What if someone gets the consequences for their actions for once, and he doesn't forgive the 3,000-year-old god? Which, by the way, is what a normal person would do. What if he even goes as far as to loathe her for it? Then, instead of having her stay back with his family after he somehow managed to save her from an even older dragon, she's forced to return to her world, regretting her actions and still holding on to his memory. Do you see how this instantly ups the stakes? Suddenly we don't just feel like everyone gets whatever they want. Our inner mind tells us there are consequences in this, and the bridge collapsing in the beginning? What if instead of no casualties, we actually get a lot of casualties? It just adds a little more realism and desperately needed tension to the whole story. Suddenly they're aware that their actions or inactions have a direct effect on the lives of others. They realize that they're superheroes, not just a bunch of kids, and they have a duty and responsibility with those powers. And again, for those who might want to say, they're just kids. Well, that's precisely the point. They are kids that have been given supernatural, even primordial powers. That in and of itself is a cross. It isn't just some fun plaything. It's a heavy burden. Okay, so I promised I was going to talk about the good of this movie. And yes, it did have its moments. For one, it genuinely cracked me up a few times. I think the producers focused more on it being able to do that than on the actual story. And I'm back at the bat again. Plus, it was... okay, I did try to put something in there, but I just couldn't think of anything. I'm sorry. Well, that's been my take on Shazam! Fury of the Gods. A lot of people just didn't care for it, and now you know why. What do you think was wrong with the story? Was it a joke, or did you think it achieved its purpose? Let me know down in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe, as you would be greatly supporting this channel. And once again, thank you so much for watching till the end. Till next time, Jana.